There's a whole lot of Husky injury news to catch up on.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another Tuesday edition of Locked On Huskies. I'm Rome Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We cover the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated's Inside the Huskies. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you so much for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Now, Lars, we are coming right back from Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb, Chuck Morrell's press conference as we get ready for Oregon week. And we got a whole lot of news today, man. The biggest one, as all our YouTube viewers can see, is that Jalen McMillan and Rome Odunze are good to go. According to Ryan Grubb, who is never one to mince words, as we like to say on this podcast, both of them will be playing today. There was a little bit of concern about Rome Odunze after he took just kind of a weird hit on the onside kick at the very end of the game against Arizona. And then, of course, Jalen McMillan has not played since the second half of the Michigan State game. So just instant thoughts. What do you got for me?
Yeah, and to be clear for fans, they've heard this twice about Jalen, that he's good to go, that he's going to be back, that he will play. And I think the thing to remember is, and Kalen DeBoer mentioned this today, it was either Kalen or Ryan Grubb, one of those two mentioned today, that Jalen probably could have played against Arizona. I think it sounded more like a last-minute scratch, not a last-minute scratch, but kind of like, hey, you know what? We should be able to come out of here with a win. We got Jeremy, we got Jalen Poole, you got, Rome was in that game. So you had enough pieces to kind of make that work, right? You don't necessarily need to rush Jalen back, especially going into the bye week. Get him a full 3 weeks off, well, 2.5 plus the Michigan State game. And then, let him roll out for the rest of the season, because whether or not, because he can come back next year. And he did, I kind of half-heartedly, jokingly, where somebody asked him a couple of weeks ago, probably 3 weeks ago now, well, you could come back and play the Big Ten next year. It's like, yeah, we'll see. But again, it's more or less, he and Rome are kind of the two that probably should go. Can come back, but probably should go. So,
and Jalen Polk's another one we can just kind of consider in that discussion, but this is more of an injury conversation than anything else. So yeah,
right, exactly. And so with having that bye week, it just allows both him and Rome to kind of get the whole body rested. I mean, the fact that Rome was down in Portland for his NIL announcement with Adidas and Michael Penix 2 or 3 days after that, kind of gave me good sign there. And Jalen, same way, where it sounded like he was great at practice on Sunday. So there's no concern, I think, going in this week to the fact that Jalen McMillan and Rome Odunze will play on Saturday against Oregon.
Ryan Grubb just always is just a man for great quotes. We love everything that he puts out in there in the world. And his first thing about Jalen McMillan was, oh, you should have seen him at practice on Sunday. And that's always just a nice thing to hear, because especially going into a top 10 matchup against the Oregon Ducks, that's exactly what you want, is to have your team at full strength. And we're going to get into a little bit more of the injury updates in the next segment, because we did hear a little bit more about Julius Buelow, Asa Turner, Tuli Letuligasenoa. So there's a whole lot to talk about just kind of on the injury front. But we wanted to dedicate a lot of time to these two guys because, I mean, it's obvious, right? Like, do I have to say it? But I mean, I will, because it's a podcast and that's what we do. But Rome Odunze was a first-team All-American in the preseason, and he has lived up to that hype in every way, shape, and form so far. Jalen McMillan was a 1,000-yard receiver last year and has also lived up to the hype coming back this year. So just having both those guys back in the fold is just so big for this offense against, yes, an improved Oregon defense, but they haven't been tested yet, and they won't be tested in any way at any point this season like the Huskies will test them.
Yeah, and I think we saw it against Arizona where, yes, you get the win. Yes, it was not comfortable, but rather secure win, right? You never truly felt like there was no USC moment where you're down 17 in the first half. Like, whoa, we got to come back. We actually got to really push for this one. You don't always seem to be in control, aside from Arizona running half the clock away in the first half. But aside from that, you could see kind of Jalen over the middle. That was not there. That Penix it wasn't he had a bad game, but he just didn't look as comfortable. And that's not a knock on Jeremy Bernard, who will be great next year and is continuing to
look really good in that game too.
Right. But the thing was, we saw more towards the second half into the fourth quarter of that game where they started to force the ball to Jeremy a little bit more. And those catches and those targets and even runs. We've seen Jalen McMillan come out of the backfield and take sweeps and things like that. So that versatility, when you don't have both of them at your disposal, it's a little harder to do with just one of them because, Polk can kind of now steps up into the McMillan role, or Jeremy steps into the McMillan role, Polk goes more outside. And there wasn't a total synchronism there. But with Jalen back, now you have that other weapon. And that's not just another weapon. It's not just another weapon. It's that other option. And when Rome is getting triple targeted, Jalen's usually the one open because Polk or Polk's open or Westover or somebody. But Jalen's kind of the guy open. But Jalen's really the one pulling the string on that because he creates that, well, you got to pick one of us. You're either going to leave Polk or you're going to leave me. You want to pick one. You'll double and triple row. Fine, whatever. But you're going to leave one of us open, and it's always usually, more often than not, Jalen McMillan.
And that's one of the things that we've talked about just all season in the preseason leading up to all this is that's one of the things with this team where there are so many options that there's always going to be somebody open. We talked about it when we had Ben Glassmeyer on the show last week, and just kind of the way that Arizona's defense just kind of aligned where they had safeties playing 30 yards off the ball. They had all these different things going on, and not having that, not only somebody who can stretch the field like McMillan does with his speed, but you're right, that over the middle threat to just do all the things that he does with the ball in his hands after the catch, that not having that does hurt the offense in a sense. And did they really need him to win that game? Obviously not, but just because that's just what this offense does. But having all those extra threats at your disposal, especially in a game like this, when game day's coming, the country is on notice for what this team can do. And the winner of this game has a very clear path to the Pac-12 championship game. It's insanely important to have your team as healthy as can possibly be in this game.
This is basically like if you take the college football playoff into the Pac-12, this is the semifinal. If you want to make it to the championship game, you have to win this game. Because, I mean, theoretically, yes, you can lose to Oregon, run the table, but then that means you have to beat USC, beat Oregon State, beat Utah. One of those three almost seems like it could be a loss, right? Especially with one of them being on the road. So it's like, okay, if you lose this is the UCLA game. Two, right, exactly. Yeah. So even more of an earn, right? Because USC.
Exactly. It strengthens your argument.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. To that point, that's why this game is so crucial because at home, you already proved you can beat Oregon at Autzen Stadium last year with this exact same offense minus Dylan Johnson and Jeremy Bernard, whatever. But for the most part, for this game, for this context, minus Dylan Johnson, right? You had Wayne Talapapa who set the tone early with a touchdown on the first drive. So it's for as great as we talk about the pass game and as important as it is, we don't want to pour water on that. But the running game also is just as important this week as the pass game. And that's why having as many weapons at your disposal allows Ryan Grubb to do more things and not necessarily get forced into, and he will never admit that he was forced into it, but forced into going to certain players and certain things more so because you don't have that other option.
I like that point a lot. And just kind of off of that, it's something where it's spreading out the defense more, right? It just allows you to just have so many different personnel packages. We've talked about the tight ends. We've talked about the running backs, talked about all the different things that they can do. And just kind of saying, okay, well, we're going to spread Oregon out. And if, they're going to put 6-7 defensive backs out there on the field. All right, we're going to throw an extra tight end out there and we're going to run the ball. This is what we want to do. Where there are so many different ways that they can counter what Oregon's going to want. To try to I think that just the proper term is this, Oregon is going to want the Huskies to play into their hands, which is something Ryan Grubb will never do. And that's something where if they're going to do that, why not just give the ball to Dylan Johnson? Where that's an extra option, but it's so much easier to do that when you're at full strength and you have every single receiving option available to you.
Exactly. And even Dylan would say that. It's like, hey, I remember talking with him in fall camp, like, we obviously have Mike Penix, but then we got Rome, Jalen, right? I mean, it's like a laundry list. It's like the Declaration of Independence. That scroll, you just whip it out and the thing just keeps on rolling.
Right.
Washington, when there's nobody on the injury list, that's the offense right there. It's just a long list of dudes you can go to.
I couldn't agree more. And, before we continue on some of these injury updates and get some of the other players, it's time to take a break and talk about our new friends over at Prize Picks. Yeah, we got some new sponsors. we're rolling out today. And testing my skills on Prize Picks this football season is just one of the most exciting ways that I can think about just to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. And one of the best things about Prize Picks is that it's really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. And Prize Picks, it's another just super fun thing about being able to just partner with them and do all these super fun things with daily fantasy, which is just one of my personal pride and joys. I love daily fantasy sports and just fantasy sports in general, is that Prize Picks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. And you can go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you get a deposit match on your first deposit up to $100. And it's just I'm sorry. I love daily fantasy sports, so I get really ahead of myself here. But Prize Picks, it's daily fantasy sports made easy. Continuing on here with the theme of the ad reads, do you have tickets for the Husky game just yet? If not, best place to do it, Game Time. There really isn't any better place, because you shouldn't have to worry about when you're buying tickets to your next big event, because especially if you don't have them to this game, the price is starting to go up. So you better get in on that Game Time app as fast as you possibly can with killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And especially if you are trying to buy tickets for this Husky game, which I implore everybody to, Kalen DeBoer did as well in his press conference today. There's so many great things about buying them on Game Time. Last minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, everything. They are obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even up to an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last minute seats. And with zone deals, you can pick the section, and Game Time picks the seats for an average of 18% savings. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Lots of ad reads today. Lots of them. Well, we appreciate all the sponsors on the show. It's great. And just continuing on with the theme of injured players, what can we expect to see from? Okay, so let's start with we're still on the offense. Let's stay with Julius Buelow, who Ryan Grubb said is dealing with a high ankle sprain, because we did see him in a walking boot during the Cal game. Didn't play against Arizona either. Grubb said he was back on the field, on the practice field on Sunday, and took 50% of reps. He didn't really go into depth, but I assume that means 50% of the first team reps. And just Lars, what do you think that just adding Julius Buelow back to this offensive line can do?
Yeah, well, I think what Ryan Grubb really hit on is it stabilizes it, because he said, in addition to what he said about Julius's injury, what he said the key point is there's not a lot of moving parts, right? I think when you're an offense, especially an offense that's big on timing, big on synchronicity like this one is, you want to have the same five guys up there. You don't want to keep flipping Nate Kalepo from left to right, depending on the week. You want him to just stay on one side of the ball, especially at this point in the season. First couple of weeks, it's okay to kind of experiment and kind of see who fits where best. But at this point, they both know where Julius Buelow and Nate Kalepo fit best. It's at right guard for Nate Kalepo, left guard for Julius Buelow. So getting him back, I think, will be a significant addition, because it allows because both of them, everybody needs to get better at the run game. So having the two guys that you started camp with get that run game going, kind of lay the foundation, and they've both been great in pass protection, which everybody else has on this offensive line. So that's not the issue. I think really it comes down to Julius is good at setting the run, especially. So I think getting him back will be key to balancing out the offense.
I agree, and I think that just to take it a step further, it just provides extra depth, right? Where Gieran Hatchett having to start, he's been good. He got called for a couple of holding penalties in the Arizona game, but he's been really good. And then his little brother Landon has also been really good. But there are things that happen. I mean, sometimes people's helmets get knocked off. Sometimes people need to go out for a series, just catch their breath, do whatever. So having as much depth as possible, especially along the interior of the offensive line, is really, really important. And we've seen that tested already this season when Gard Memolar went down early in the year. Mateo Mele goes down. And it's what we thought was going to be a real strength of this team has still been really good, but it just hasn't been as deep as we just kind of originally assumed it was. But also that's kind of like a credit to us, because we were saying this is really a deep, talented front. But now that depth is getting tested, and they've withstood well to this point. And Oregon's got a really good pass rush, and we're going to talk more about that as we continue on here today. But just having your starting five, really, because as much as we kind of look at this, it kind of feels like that if Mateo Mele was there at center, Parker at right guard, and Julius at left guard, that's probably what the starting five would have been just kind of throughout the season, right? Even if Gardner Millar didn't get hurt, he would have been really, really heavy in the rotation. Probably would have been that sixth guy, and Nick Kalepa would be right there as well. But this is kind of, in terms of the injuries we've already seen, this is as good as it's going to get if Julius Buelow can in fact go this Saturday, which I am a betting man, especially if we did talk about, we talk about FanDuel a lot on the show. I would say that he's leaning towards playing on Saturday.
Yeah, because the other option you have behind him is Landon Hatchett, is a true freshman and not so little brother of Garen Hatchett, but
younger brothers.
I didn't want to correct you, but I'm saying one of my actually I think between the two, Landon's actually bigger. I think
you might be right.
Like maybe not in the height, but
he's definitely
he is what we call a unit. So, but that's what you want in the trenches, right? Certainly on any side of the ball. But I think at this point, Landon has looked great. So we're not pouring water on his future and things like that. Same thing with Garen, right? He's looked good. He had a couple bad plays against Arizona, but again, for a guy who's still getting in there, he's going to be important. You want him to factor in toward the thing. He's progressing as well. But you don't want Landon as a true freshman next to redshirt freshman Parker Brailsford as your two interior going to the left before you get to Troy Fatano. Not to knock them, right? But
it's not like they haven't been good.
Right.
Especially Parker's been great.
Right, exactly. But with both of them kind of getting their feet still wet as starters and playing significant minutes on a live college game, you don't necessarily want to have that at this point. You want them to be in the rotation. You want them to be there, but you would rather have a guy like Julius Buelow, Garen Hatchett, guys that have been in the program for a couple of years, just taking those first reps and then get plenty of reps in the second half when you got a 25-point lead.
Right. And switching it over to the other side of the ball here, since the defense, I think that there are a little bit more questions there, where Chuck Morrell was asked about Tuli Letuligasenoa and Asa Turner today and their status, and he just said there's a chance that they'll play. And that's the way the question was phrased, and all he said was yes. So
I was gonna say it wasn't really it was more of like a statement that was said yes, yeah, there's a chance, yeah. But however you characterize it.
To be fair, that's also what he said about Asa's health before the Arizona game, where he just said TBD. So it's a very Chuck Morrell answer as we've gotten to know him over the last year and a half or so. So what just outlook for could you give us an outlook, and then would you lean towards yes or no for both of them?
So I'm inclined to think no on Tuli. I think Vince Nunley starts at safety in that spot with Campab, or maybe Campab and him kind of get reps. But I think Asa will be suited. I just don't know necessarily if he'll start. Again, it's one of those where, if there's ever a game to where these guys would push it and play, it's this game. The thing with Tuli is I think that one might be just a little bit longer. And the reason for that, same thing with the safeties, is you have an emerging Javon Parker, who's the second highest graded defensive lineman in the conference among interior defensive linemen by a PFF. So you've got bodies that are capable. I think with Tuitele back, in the rotation, and should be able to be full go as well, that those guys and MJLA as well. MJ, I think, is the other one that's key, because he went out against Arizona but came back in the game. Yes. Tuli left and never returned. That one also was kind of more in the dark of okay, how not necessarily in the Mateo Mele mold, right? It's not that long term, but I get more of a sense with that one. Whereas Asa, I think it's more of a lingering can we, should we, can't we, closer to the Jalen McMillan mold of, hey, do we give him 2-3 weeks? I think Asa will be fine. It's just a matter of how much do you want to play him and what role does he play? Because again, Vince, that's what's kind of made this interesting, is Vince Nunley's played his tail off. So I think
exactly.
So I think, obviously you want Asa's leadership back there and the veteran presence, and him and Campab both share. But I think Vince has played enough to say, hey, we need him on the field just as much. So if Asa needs a breather, or if he gets, hurt again, or just has to kind of be on a pitch count, you're more comfortable with those guys in the back end. Same thing with Tuli, although I think Tuli is a little more of a likelihood to miss the game than Asa at this point.
So right now, I would say 50-50 on both. Where you're right, with Asa, it's definitely more of a lingering issue because he's been out around the same amount of time. He missed the Michigan State game as well. So he's been out for a little over a month now, and the bye week certainly helps with all these things. You never know about setbacks or anything like that. But then with Tuli, yes, you're right. It could be more of a lingering issue where it's maybe a will he, won't he kind of thing. Maybe you wake up, see how he feels on game day, and just kind of go from there. But the one of the questions that I really have when it comes to Tuli is, do you suit him up and then just kind of play him like we talked about yesterday, 10, 15 snaps, and just kind of make sure that he's out there on the field for a little bit in any given time? Because you're right, you do have a deep rotation of guys to go to. You can go to Javon Parker. You can go to Fatu Tuitele, MJ Ale, Jacob Bandis, who we talked about, who's been really good. And you can even maybe throw in Javon's brother Armand, who we've kind of been waiting for, and we know that's also injury related, where he's still coming off an ACL injury he suffered in December of 2021, I believe is where you had it in your story. And that's just another one. Yeah, getting all those plugs in. But that's just another one where it's like, oh, well, maybe here's just another option. And then, yeah, Tuli's out there and he sets the tempo. He's out there for a couple of snaps here, a couple of snaps there when you think that Oregon's probably going to end up running the ball. And then, yeah, you just kind of rely on your rotation to get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument to be made, sure, for that, but I don't know necessarily if Kalen's going to be. Kalen doesn't strike me as the guy who would suit a guy up if he didn't know that he could go full board, right? I mean, I think that's why
I agree with you there, yeah.
Where like, I mean, they could have done the same thing with Jalen McMillan against Arizona, where does he have to play? No. Could you suit him? I mean, he was announced as a starter against Cal at Husky Stadium on the PA announcement. So it's like, and that one he was less likely to play. So part of me thinks, well, yes, you could suit him up. And if he's able, I think the key is by Thursday, if they feel he's progressed well enough to where he's able to suit up, I think that's going to be the thing, because I don't know necessarily. I think he's probably going to end up needing one more week to not suit up, just straight up hold him out, kind of like Julius against Cal, where it was like, could he play? Could he not play? Probably not. But just give him that extra little bit, because of, as we said, they got the body. So, I mean, I think if they were more in a pinch, right, if you don't have a Javon Parker, if you don't have an MJLA, right, if you have one or if you don't have Fatu even, like if Fatu hadn't come back, I think then, yeah, now you're kind of, your hand's a little more forced.
But here's the thing for me, where this is just a different game. This is a different atmosphere. And that's where I kind of lean towards, because a player is always going to tell you, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I can play. Yeah, I can get through this. Especially when this is not a matchup that Kalen DeBoer has had in his career before. This is totally different. This is a top 10 matchup. And it's something where this is what not only like do the coaching staff know what they need to do and they want to win this game. They want to get through all that. But this is something that the players just want. This is why they came back. This is why they're on this team, for a matchup like this. So getting as much as you possibly can is crucial. And I think that's really just something to consider as you kind of monitor his status throughout the week. And before we keep going here, because we got I know we're going to have a very fun conversation about Oregon's pass rush, because we just love seeing some of the things that we have on Twitter. We got to take a quick second here, talk about our friends over at Jace Medical, because you never want to be unprepared in an emergency, and everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jace Medical offers the Jace Case. The Jace Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you peace of mind, so that you're not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Jace Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to the licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Get $20 off these life-saving antibiotics from Jace Medical by using my code LOCKEDON at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. All right. What do you think about this Oregon pass rush? Just straight up.
I mean, it's good. It's decent. right? I mean, I think the thing about it is, I mean, it was the same thing almost going into last year's game where it's like, oh, hey, they're going to get pressure on Penix. They're going to get pressure on Penix. And we saw it at times, right?
Sure.
But he also didn't get sacked against Oregon last year. Bo Nix did. So, like, Washington won that 1-0 and won the game 1-0. So I think it's almost like, well, we saw 2 sacks against Arizona and they're still able to win the game. So I don't think it's going to be a detriment. Obviously, yes, Oregon's better. Well, sacks are skewed.
Sacks are always a detriment in a certain way, but no, I hear your point. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think I mean, you obviously know about Brandon Dorlus, right? That's kind of the obvious one. Taki Taimani,
Jordan Birch.
Right. And those guys are all there. I just think that it's more or less whose offensive line am I taking? Or it's like, which line do you want? Do you want Oregon's defensive line or Washington's offensive line? I think at this point, I'm betting on Washington's offensive line over Oregon's defensive line.
So, like, where does that come from? Because I have my own thoughts, and I think we're going to go in the same place on this. But why would you trust this line over that one?
Because I think when you think about it, I mean, kind of a lame way to do it here, but if you just look at the PFF pass rush rankings, it ain't there. It ain't there like it was a couple of years ago. I mean, I'm looking at this. I mean, Javon Parker and Zion Tupuola-Fatui and Braylon Trice are all the 3 players that come up before any Oregon player does. And the first one that comes up is Brandon Dorlus at 14.
Interesting.
So what? And now we flip that to look at Washington's. And again, PFF is not the end all be all, but I love it when it fits a narrative. But we love it when it fits a narrative. So with that being said,
that's why they're there.
We look at Washington's offensive line. 2 of the top. This is where it gets a little interesting because Oregon also does have a very good pass blocking offensive line, and we've seen Washington kind of not struggle per se, but the pass rush isn't what it was going to be to start the season. It's good, but they haven't gotten home and things like that. But Roger Rosengard and Troy Furtado are 2 of the top 10 graded offensive linemen, in bar none, just full stop. Like,
sure.
You know, so, and when it comes to pass blocking, yeah, so exactly, ironically enough, so when you're looking at the top 5 graded offensive linemen in the Pac-12 conference among all players eligible, centers, tackles, and guards, Oregon, Washington, Oregon. Yeah, so 3 Oregon players and 2 Washington players. And Troy Furtado and Roger Rosengard are your 2 possible. And that's where I'm talking about, because if you're going, the pressure is going to come up the middle from Penix. That's where Oregon's pressure is going to come. And I think Washington has the ability. We've seen it with Dylan Johnson and a few others that can pick up that extra rusher up the middle or outside. And between the edges, I'm betting on Roger and Troy. That's an easy bet for me. So that's where, to answer your question, that's where it comes from. Is if I'm looking at Oregon's edges versus Washington's tackles, that's not a comparison. That's not a debate.
I agree with you there. And because the point I wanted to make was I wanted to just emphasize the strength of schedule, because something we talked about last week, and we're not knocking the talent that Oregon has. They're very talented. Brandon Dorlus, Jordan Birch, Matayo Angalele. Like they have a lot of really talented players on that defensive front, but they haven't, the strength of schedule is still ranked 101st. It's not great. And this is, and it's something I put up on Inside the Huskies. This isn't just Washington's biggest test. It's also Oregon's. And there's a sense that I've gotten just kind of from reading some of the stuff that I have just across the interwebs, where it's Oregon kind of seems to just be taking this in a different direction, or at least in the places that I've looked, where it's just kind of like, oh yeah, Oregon's going to definitely put pressure on Penix at the middle. It's like, but will they? This Washington line is good. Like, yeah, it's possible, but this Washington line is good. And I'm sure that any Duck fan who might be listening is going to think the same thing from what we're talking about. Just, you're just severely underestimating Oregon's defensive line, just talking all about Washington's offensive line. But it's the same thing, especially because this offensive line, especially both tackles, they were here last year. They did the same exact thing last year. So there's almost more of a proven track record there.
Yeah, and I mean, like last year, the center was Corey Luciano. This year, and this year is Parker Burles. I would argue Parker is a better talent. Corey, obviously, no question, had the leadership and was talented in his own right. There was no knock of his talent. But I think if you're picking the 2 long-term, which one would you want to roll with for 3 or 4 years? I think you're picking Parker. But having said that, I mean, when you look at Oregon's interior pass rush, Taki Taimani is a run stuffer. He ain't a pass rusher. So where is that pass? I mean, just Jordan Birch stunt and go up the middle, just Brandon Dorlus stunt and go up the middle. You know, how do you?
It's possible, sure.
The caveat, right, and both Oregon fans and Washington fans will say this game, the record before this doesn't matter, right? They're both 5-0, but the opponents, everybody plays up for this game. And we talked about in previous years how Washington would play down to their opponents or not get up for big games. That hasn't been the case with Kalen DeBoer. They've gotten up for every game. I can't remember a game where Washington was comfortably behind at halftime.
Right.
Like there were some games where maybe they trailed in the first half, first quarter. I mean, Cal would be the game maybe that comes to mind last year.
Down there, yeah.
And look what happened this year. So, like, I think, Ryan Grubb, another whole year, Dan Lanning. I mean, I think if you're telling me Tasha Boy versus Ryan Grubb, I'm taking Ryan Grubb any day and twice on Sunday. So,
oh, absolutely. Like that's
all I gotta say. And it comes down to if both units have talent,
right?
Which coaching is going to win out? We saw Mario Cristobal. Boy, great move in Miami.
Which we have to remind everybody it's not the first time he's done that.
Exactly. So I think, coaching matters, right? Talent unquestionably matters. You're not going to if Kalen DeBoer were at Sioux Falls right now playing Oregon, it wouldn't be close, right? Just because the talent gap and everything there would just be too much, right? But equal talent, equal fight, give me the coaching.
Absolutely. And that's what it is. And just this is definitely my final thought. I want to know what you have to say, but what my final thought is exactly to what you just said, where they're like both you and I have watched a lot of football in our lives. I have never seen coaching make as much of a difference as I have from watching the 2021 Washington offense versus watching the 2022 Washington offense. And this is like, we always say it's the last time we're going to harp on John Donovan, but it's like, whatever. It's just, good coaching matters this much. How much? Here, the proof is in the pudding. Watch one drive from that Husky team in 2021. Just pick any game, probably the Michigan game. Pick the Michigan game and then pick the 2022 game. Just watch any drive against Oregon, and you'll see what a difference coaching makes. You're absolutely right.
I mean, aside from Michael Penix, but with that, I mean, if you look at Penix, but here's the thing, and here's how this all ties together. Penix never had an offensive line in Indiana.
Yep.
Ryan Grubb did not have an offensive line at Fresno State. All three of them put together was a match made in heaven.
It's cooking. That's all it is. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. And thank you to the everydayers out there who just, we really appreciate all your support. We love that everything you've done with this podcast. We appreciate all the shout outs we get on social media. And if you're not an everydayer yet, we'd love to see you become one. And the best way to do that, just wherever you're listening to this, make sure you subscribe, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We are everywhere with all of these things. And make sure you like, comment, leave us 5-star review. Whatever it is, you have any questions for us, you can tweet at us. You can leave them in the comments. We will try to get back to as many of them as we possibly can. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you on Wednesday.